Okay, I'm going to carry on with the portrait project that we started last week. So I thought to do some work on this last week, this week and next week. And then there's a couple more weeks in March, being 5 weeks. So I thought perhaps move on to another project for the last couple of weeks for those of you that want to move on. But if you want to just stick with the portrait, you're very welcome to do that. So this was one of the demos I did last week. I can't remember in which class. But I just thought I'd do a very quick recap because one or two people weren't here last week. So this is more of a drawing demo, and what I'll do today is I'll do something of a painting demo. But really, if I was drawing a face, it's best to have a nice, if you can, a nice big photograph where the features are reasonably clear. I start off very kind of lightly, usually just to place where I want the head to be. So that's my first point. And then what I'm really then looking for is if there's a slight tilt to the head. So in this case, he's very slightly tilted. So it's worth putting, maybe with a light pencil, just put some guidelines in, just sort of very lightly. And what I'm looking for there is like a line of symmetry through the middle of the features. Tend to ignore the nose, but maybe through the forehead, the eyes, and then coming out here. So I'm looking for that, and then I'm looking for eye level. So almost like a line that goes through the middle of the eyes. So sketch something like that in. And then once I'm there, I usually just start here and just carefully draw out, the features, the space between the eyes. Then I'll work my way down to the nose, then through to the mouth. And then once I've got the features in, I then start to try and get a definite shape to the face. So rather than do that first, I usually wait till I've got the proportions and the spacings for the features. And then I'll then work, how much forehead, how much at the top of the head, how much down to the chin, how much out to where the jaw changes direction, whereabouts the ears might be in relation to the features. So that's how I go about drawing portraits. So I'd just like, quick recap on that, just because one or two people missed that session. Today I thought I'd go into a little bit of painting. There's various photos there if you wanted to use one of the portrait photos. So this I thought I'd use one of these. So that was, so I thought I'd use that photo. Now this particular palette, I've not really used this before, but it's something that I've heard of for many years, and it's called the Zorn palette. And basically it's just a couple of colours and some white. So it's named after a Swedish artist called Zorn, who did very lovely paintings, landscapes, people, things like that. I don't think he just used this palette. I think he would have used other colours as well. But this basic palette is basically some yellow ochre, some cadmium red, and some black and some white. So just like a few colours and some white, 3 colours and white. And I thought it'd be an interesting one to try out. And you can get a nice sort of approximation of a portrait. You're not going to get every single colour that you could see in flesh, but you're going to get something that's, you can get a little bit of light and dark and a hint of flesh tones with this. So I thought it'd be a good one to try. The other thing I thought I'd combine it with is this idea of, so this was an old one from many years ago, a demo I did. This was like a white and black technique. So the idea is you put some colour down, maybe like a mid-tone, and then you wipe areas out, and then you're painting dark with the darker bits. So that's quite a nice idea. And last week I ended up doing, one of the students was having a go at a portrait, and so I ended up doing that just as a little demo for her, and I thought, well, that might combine quite well with this Zorn palette. So that one was actually using yellow ochre and 2 shades of brown, like the burnt sienna and raw umber. So that was like, and I don't think there's any white there, so it's just thin paint. And this was just really sketching out underpainting and just trying to get to focus in on where the lights and darks were. So rather than look for eyelashes and nostrils, it's very much just looking at patches of light, patches of dark, getting them in the right place, and hopefully a portrait comes out. And that was the one I had posed this morning as a demo. So anyway, what I've done here is, this morning's one, I started with a yellow, but I thought I'd add a little bit of red in, and that could perhaps be a basis for you know, flesh. Now in this particular photo, most of his face is in shadow. The only bit of light is catching the side of his beard and his hair and the back of his shoulder. So it's a nice tonal image. So actually all of his face is pretty much in shadow. So if I pop a tone like that in, roughly where I want his face to be, that will be, I think, quite a good start. Just use a nice big brush. This, what I'm using here is water mixable oils. So this will wipe out or stay wet for quite a long time. So it's a nice medium to use for this particular project. And then gradually work in some sort of slightly darker tones. So just mix a slightly darker flesh colour. So mostly the red and the yellow, but just a hint of the black. I don't want to go too dark too quickly. I'm really just trying to find out, you know, maybe eye sockets, perhaps eye sockets about there, and maybe there. And using a reasonable sized brush, and then I can start to work in some shadows. There's a little bit of shadow just under his eye socket, a bit of shadow just coming in here, shadow under his nose, and then shadows sort of kind of around where his hair is going to be. I think his forehead it gets a little bit darker up here, and there's some shadows coming over this side here. So this is quite a nice. You need some sort of surface where you can lift the paint out ideally for this. So if your board's very absorbent, it will be a difficult one because you'd have trouble picking the paint off. But with this one, this is just like an old board that I keep priming. I should be able, if I want to, I should be able to lift sort of areas out and bring highlights back in, which I think I can there. That's okay. And then just as I work my way down, I've got a slightly darker mix here that I mixed earlier. So this is a slightly greyer mix that's going to work, I think, fairly well for where his moustache is going to be. A little bit darker where his mouth is, perhaps just a bit darker in there. And might need to go to a slightly smaller brush. Just maybe lighten that a tiny bit. Lighten that a little bit there. And then, yeah, more shadow in here. Just coming out to there. And then it gets a lot lighter here. So this is probably where I need to go lighter. I think before I lose that tone, I'll use some of what I've got on my brush just to sketch in where his hair is going to be. So just make that a tiny bit more fluid. So that's going to go around here. And across there a bit. And then around here. And yeah, obviously any adjustments I can just wipe back a bit, so tiny bit out there. So as I say, the light is really catching, you know, all this is in shadow, so I'll just use that to pop in some background tones as well. Just do that, water that down just so I can get that in quickly. And there's shadow on his jacket, so obviously I haven't got blue here, so I will just use the black and a tiny bit of red mixed with that. That should be, gives an impression where his shoulders and his jacket's going to be. I think just pop in some highlights now. A little bit on over his shoulder a little bit, so maybe I'll just wipe that back a little bit, just lift some of the paint off out. And then around here, I will just go in with a bit of clean water, just lift some of that yellowy colour out and wipe that back. And then I should get a slightly bigger brush, clean brush, and put some of the lights in. Let's try that one. So it's not pure white, but it is fairly light, so just white with a hint of the grey. Tiniest bit of yellow, just to warm that up a little bit. So yeah, that's going to be sort of up to about there. I probably need to go in a little bit darker here now, actually, sort of seeing that, seeing the light go on. Okay, back to a slightly smaller brush and just define his features a little bit more. So I can then sort of get a little bit of eye shape, perhaps his eyebrow in there. See the side of his nostrils to there. It's not quite that dark, just got a bit of lighter there. And that can come in a little bit more. Then sort of start to refine those shapes. So that's kind of the gist of it. There's a bit more shadow there, and I just kind of work back in a little bit and into there. More shadows in here. And then just a little bit more light, and then I'll stop there and just let it crack on. So the light, that catches his hair pretty much runs straight into his beard. So rather than thinking, his hair looks like this and his beard that, you can almost find a colour that just runs right the way through that. Something more like that. And then go darker, cut in a bit darker there. So it's quite a nice, fun way to work, quite enjoyable way to work. You could probably do something similar with acrylics. It's going to dry a bit quicker, but you could just overpaint instead. But it's getting used to drawing with brushes, just feeling your way through the shapes with the brushes, rather than what I did last week, which is very much an outline type drawing and then filling in. So the shapes, come about through the adding brush marks and pushing paint. Obviously, this one I started as a demo this morning, and then I've then worked into it a little bit during the session. So that was another one I did, and it's a lot. That one I kind of went back and wiped areas out. So that was from that photograph. Obviously more to do, but you could, you can keep sort of tweaking, washing bits out, adding bits in, changing it around. It's quite a fun way to work. Anybody want to ask anything? No, all good to go? Yeah. So as I say, next week I'll do a little bit on pastels next week. So that's the next one. Okay.